Hello and welcome back. I'm glad you found your way here again tonight. There's nothing you need to do right now except settle in and let your body grow heavy against the bed. Let your breathing slow. Let your thoughts loosen their grip on the day, the way a hand slowly opens. Tonight we're drifting into the misty courtyards and torch-lit halls of medieval Europe, a world of knights, castles, and quiet, patient stone walls that have watched centuries pass. Some of what you hear tonight may surprise you. Some of it may simply settle over you like old candlelight, familiar and strange all at once. If any of this helps you unwind, consider subscribing to Drowsy with Facts so you can drift off with us again soon. For now, let's begin. Knighthood emerged gradually during the early medieval period, evolving from earlier traditions of mounted warriors, serving a lord in exchange for land, loyalty, and protection, a relationship that shaped nearly every level of medieval society. Becoming a knight was rarely quick, and most boys destined for knighthood began training around the age of 7, first serving as a page learning basic manners and horsemanship before eventually advancing to the more demanding role of a squire. A squire served an experienced knight directly, caring for his weapons, armor, and horse, while gradually learning the combat skills and codes of conduct expected of a fully trained knight through years of close hands-on apprenticeship. The formal ceremony that finally elevated a squire to knighthood often involved a ritual blow delivered to the shoulder, along with solemn oaths promising loyalty, courage, and protection of the weak, a moment carrying enormous personal and social significance. Chivalry, the code of conduct expected of a medieval knight, emphasized courage, loyalty, honor, and courtesy, particularly toward women, the clergy, and those unable to defend themselves, though real historical behavior didn't always live up to this same lofty ideal. Medieval armor evolved considerably over the centuries, beginning with flexible chainmail made of thousands of interlocking metal rings, before gradually giving way to solid plate armor, offering considerably greater protection against increasingly powerful weapons. A full suit of plate armor, contrary to popular myth, wasn't especially heavy or restrictive for a trained knight, and skilled wearers could run, climb, and even perform acrobatic mounts onto their horse while fully armored. Crafting a single suit of plate armor required considerable skill and time, and a skilled armorer might spend weeks carefully shaping, fitting, and finishing a suit, tailored precisely to its owner's individual body. Castles first began appearing across medieval Europe primarily as practical, defensive structures, allowing a relatively small garrison to successfully hold off a considerably larger attacking force through clever use of walls, height, and controlled access points. Early medieval castles were often built primarily from timber, constructed quickly atop a raised earthen mound, before later generations of castle builders gradually shifted toward far more durable, expensive, and defensible stone construction. A castle's design incorporated numerous deliberate defensive features, including narrow windows suited to firing arrows, while offering minimal exposure to enemy attackers, and spiral staircases designed to favor a right-handed defender fighting downward. Castle moats, the water-filled ditches surrounding many fortresses, served a genuinely practical defensive purpose, making it considerably more difficult for attackers to bring siege equipment close enough to the walls to be effective. Murder holes, Openings built directly into a castle's gatehouse ceiling allowed defenders to drop stones, boiling liquid, or other unpleasant deterrents directly onto attackers who had managed to breach the outer gate. The castle's Great Hall functioned as the social and administrative heart of the entire fortress, used for feasting, receiving guests, conducting legal proceedings, and housing many members of the household during colder months. Castle kitchens were often positioned some distance from the Great Hall specifically to reduce fire risk, requiring dedicated staff to carry hot food across considerable distance while it was still warm enough to serve. Medieval siege warfare relied on an impressive range of specialized equipment, including massive stone-throwing devices and tall wheeled towers, designed to allow attackers to climb directly over a castle's defensive walls. A prolonged siege could stretch on for months or even years, and defenders inside a well-stocked castle sometimes successfully outlasted attacking forces simply by holding out until the besieging army ran low on supplies and morale. Tournaments, staged combat events held for both entertainment and practical training, allowed knights to demonstrate and sharpen their skills in relatively controlled conditions, though injuries and occasional deaths still occurred regularly. Jousting, the most famous tournament event, involved two mounted knights charging toward one another with blunted lances, aiming to unseat their opponent cleanly while maintaining careful control of a galloping warhorse. A knight's warhorse, specifically bred and trained for combat, was an enormously valuable and carefully maintained asset, and losing one in battle represented a genuinely serious financial and practical setback. Heraldry, the system of distinctive symbols and colors displayed on a knight's shield and banner, allowed for immediate identification on a chaotic battlefield where a fully armored knight's face remained completely hidden behind his helmet. These same heraldic designs followed increasingly formal rules over time, and specialized officials eventually emerged whose job involved carefully tracking, recording, and regulating which family held the right to display which particular design. Medieval castles often included a dedicated chapel, reflecting the central importance of religious practice in daily medieval life, and resident priests conducted regular services for the Lord's household and garrison alike. Castle dungeons, though popularly imagined purely as grim prison cells, more commonly served as storage cellars, and formal, long-term imprisonment was actually a relatively uncommon medieval punishment compared to fines or corporal punishment. The Crusades, a lengthy series of religious military campaigns, drew knights from across medieval Europe to fight in distant lands, motivated by a complex mixture of genuine religious conviction, desire for land, and pursuit of personal glory. Military religious orders emerged during this same era, combining monastic religious discipline with knightly combat training, their members bound by vows of poverty and obedience alongside their martial responsibilities. Medieval swords varied considerably in design depending on their era and intended use, and skilled sword makers carefully balanced blade weight, flexibility, and durability to suit a knight's particular fighting style. A knight's shield, beyond its obvious defensive purpose, also served as an important surface for displaying heraldic identity, gradually shrinking in size over the centuries, as plate armor increasingly provided sufficient protection on its own. Medieval castle walls were sometimes deliberately built with a slight outward slope near their base, a design feature intended to deflect attacking projectiles and cause dropped objects to bounce outward onto attackers below. Arrow loops, the narrow defensive slits found throughout castle walls, were carefully shaped to allow archers inside a wide firing angle, while presenting attackers outside with only a very slim target to aim at in return. Castle gatehouses represented a fortress's most vulnerable point, and builders responded by making them the most heavily defended section of the entire structure, often layered with multiple gates, portcullises, and dedicated defensive chambers. A portcullis, a heavy gate, typically made of latticed wood or metal, could be rapidly lowered to seal a gateway during a surprise attack, operated through a system of chains and a winch positioned safely above. Medieval knights typically maintained a household of supporting staff, and a well-equipped knight might travel to battle accompanied by squires, grooms, and other attendants responsible for maintaining his equipment and horses. The concept of courtly love, an idealized, often unattainable, romantic devotion, became a popular literary theme during the medieval period, celebrated extensively in poetry, song, and storytelling of the era. Wandering poets and musicians traveled between medieval courts, composing and performing songs celebrating chivalry, romance, and notable deeds, helping spread and shape the popular image of knighthood across the wider region. Castle builders paid careful attention to water supply, and a well-designed castle typically included its own dedicated well, ensuring defenders could survive a prolonged siege without depending on water sources outside the walls. Medieval banquets held within a castle's great hall could become remarkably elaborate affairs featuring multiple courses, entertainment from musicians and performers, and an occasion for a lord to visibly display his wealth and generosity. A knight's coat of arms, once granted, was typically passed down through his family, becoming a lasting hereditary symbol carried forward by his descendants across many subsequent generations. Medieval castle construction required an enormous, sustained labor force, and building a single major stone castle could take many years to complete, employing skilled masons, carpenters, and countless laborers throughout the lengthy process. Certain castles were strategically positioned atop naturally defensible terrain, including steep hills or narrow peninsulas, allowing builders to take full advantage of the surrounding landscape's own natural defensive qualities. Trebuchets, among the most powerful medieval siege weapons, used a carefully counterweighted arm to hurl heavy projectiles with considerable force and accuracy against castle walls and structures. Medieval knights trained extensively before ever seeing real combat, practicing regularly with wooden weapons and specially designed training equipment to build the strength, precision, and instinctive skill required for actual battle. The knight's helmet evolved considerably over the medieval period, gradually incorporating improved ventilation, better visibility, and more effective protection as armorers continued refining their understanding of battlefield injuries. Medieval castles frequently included a keep, a heavily fortified central tower serving as the final line of defense, and often the lord's primary residence, positioned to remain defensible even if outer walls were breached. Falconry, the practice of hunting using trained birds of prey, became a popular and prestigious pastime, among medieval nobility, requiring considerable patience, skill, and dedicated care for the birds themselves. Medieval tournaments gradually evolved increasingly elaborate rules and formal structure over time, shifting somewhat from genuinely dangerous mock combat toward more ceremonial, closely regulated demonstrations of skill. A knight's oath of loyalty to his lord carried enormous social and legal weight, and breaking that same sworn bond was considered a serious act of dishonor, carrying real social and sometimes legal consequences. Medieval castle towers were sometimes built with deliberately misaligned floor levels between different sections, a subtle defensive measure intended to disorient attackers who had already breached the outer walls. Certain medieval knights gained lasting historical fame, not through battlefield victories alone, but through their conduct, generosity, and adherence to chivalric ideals, remembered fondly in songs and stories told for generations afterward. Medieval blacksmiths and armorers held respected, essential positions within a castle community, and a skilled smith's work directly affected the survival chances of every knight and soldier relying on his craftsmanship. Castle latrines, often built projecting outward from the main walls, allowed waste to drop directly outside the fortress, a practical, if imperfect, medieval sanitation solution. Medieval sieges sometimes ended not through direct assault at all, but through careful negotiation, bribery, or simply starving out a garrison, tactics considerably less costly than a direct bloody assault on well-defended walls. A knight's ransom paid to secure the release of a captured noble opponent represented a significant, sometimes lucrative source of income during medieval warfare, and capturing a wealthy enemy alive was often more profitable than killing him. Medieval castle gardens, when space allowed, provided both practical herbs and vegetables for the household, and a pleasant, quiet retreat for residents seeking a moment of calm within an otherwise busy fortress. The longbow, though not exclusively a knight's weapon, dramatically changed medieval battlefield tactics, and skilled archers could penetrate armor at considerable range, gradually altering how knights approached open combat. Medieval knights often commissioned elaborate tomb effigies, carved stone or metal figures depicting them in full armor, intended to preserve their memory and status for generations of visitors long after their death. Castle life followed a fairly structured daily rhythm, with meals, prayers, training, and household duties occurring at predictable times throughout the day, organized carefully around the needs of the lord's household and garrison. Medieval blacksmithing techniques for armor and weapons continued advancing steadily throughout the period, with each generation of craftsmen building on the accumulated knowledge and innovation of those who came before them. Certain medieval castles incorporated cleverly designed acoustic features, allowing sound, including approaching footsteps or voices, to carry unusually far through specific stone passages, offering defenders an early warning of approaching visitors. A knight's personal motto, often displayed alongside his coat of arms, offered a brief, carefully chosen phrase reflecting his personal values or family tradition, passed down and sometimes adapted across generations. Medieval castles occasionally changed hands multiple times over the centuries through marriage, inheritance, conquest, or purchase, each new owner sometimes modifying and expanding the original structure to suit their own needs. The decline of the traditional castle as a primary military structure began gradually as gunpowder weapons grew more powerful, since thick stone walls, however impressive, eventually proved less effective against cannon fire than they had against earlier siege weapons. Even as their military importance faded, many castles continued serving as impressive residences, symbols of status and lineage that their noble owners were often reluctant to abandon entirely. Among the various military religious orders that emerged during the Crusades, one particularly famous order combined banking and financial services with their military role, eventually becoming wealthy enough to lend money to kings before their dramatic downfall centuries later. Another prominent military order, dedicated originally to caring for sick pilgrims traveling to the Holy Land, gradually expanded into a significant military force of its own, eventually relocating and continuing its mission from several different island strongholds over the centuries. One of the most formidable Crusader castles ever built, positioned in what's now Syria, was designed with concentric walls, one ring nested inside another, allowing defenders to fall back and continue resisting, even if the outer wall was eventually breached. The feudal system underlying medieval knighthood organized society into a careful hierarchy, with land granted downward from king to noble lords, and further down to knights, in exchange for loyalty and military service, owed back upward in return. Beneath the knights and nobility, most medieval people lived as peasants or serfs, working the land and owing labor or a share of their harvest to the lord whose territory they lived within. A considerably harder and more constrained existence than knighthood itself. The signing of a famous charter by an English king, pressured heavily by his own rebellious barons and knights, established important early limits on royal power. A document still referenced today as a foundational moment in the development of constitutional law. Medieval tournaments took different forms depending on the era, and earlier tournaments often featured a chaotic mock battle called a melee, involving many knights fighting in loosely organized teams across open countryside, before the more familiar one-on-one joust became the dominant format. Beyond swords, medieval knights trained with a range of other weapons, including heavy maces and warhammers specifically designed to concentrate crushing force against an opponent's armor, where a bladed weapon might simply glance off. The crossbow, capable of being fired accurately with relatively little training compared to a longbow, became a significant medieval weapon, though its use against fellow Christians was, for a time, formally condemned by church authorities as unfairly effective. A full suit of plate armor included many carefully articulated individual pieces, protecting hands, forearms, shins, and every other major joint. Each piece engineered to allow reasonable freedom of movement while minimizing exposed gaps. Even war horses were sometimes fitted with their own protective armor, covering the animal's head, chest, and flanks, adding considerable weight but offering meaningful protection to an enormously valuable and vulnerable battlefield asset. Knights typically maintained more than one horse for different purposes, including a powerful, specially trained combat horse reserved specifically for battle, and a separate, gentler horse better suited to ordinary travel and everyday riding. Castle design evolved considerably from an early, relatively simple style built around a raised earthen mound topped with a wooden or stone tower, toward far more elaborate, multi-layered fortresses featuring several concentric rings of defensive walls. Castle walls were topped with alternating raised and lowered sections, allowing defenders to duck behind solid stone for protection while still being able to observe and fire upon attackers below through the lower gaps. Lowering a castle's drawbridge relied on a carefully counterweighted mechanism, allowing even a relatively small number of defenders to raise or lower this substantial structure relatively quickly when needed. When direct assault seemed too costly, attacking forces sometimes employed massive mobile wooden towers built tall enough to allow soldiers to cross directly onto a castle's walls, protected by wet hides intended to resist fire. Battering rams, heavy reinforced logs, swung repeatedly against a gate or wall, represented one of the more straightforward medieval siege tactics, though defenders often countered them with dropped stones or improvised countermeasures from above. Rather than attacking walls directly, some besieging forces dug tunnels beneath a castle's foundations, deliberately collapsing the tunnel once complete in hopes of bringing down the wall above along with it. Incendiary weapons, including various early formulations of flammable substances, were sometimes used during medieval sieges, capable of igniting wooden structures and siege equipment even in adverse conditions. A young squire's daily training regimen was genuinely demanding, combining weapons practice, horsemanship, wrestling, and considerable physical conditioning, all layered alongside his more ordinary daily household duties. Grand medieval feasts held within a castle's great hall might feature numerous elaborate courses, including large roasted game, spiced dishes reflecting the considerable expense of imported spices, and elaborately decorated dishes intended purely to impress important guests. Traveling minstrels and troubadours performed songs and poetry at medieval courts, often specializing in tales of romance, heroism, and chivalric adventure that helped shape popular ideas about what an ideal knight ought to be. Heraldic colors and symbols followed increasingly specific, formal rules over time, with particular colors and animal symbols carrying established meanings related to virtues like courage, loyalty, or noble lineage. A knight's surcoat, worn over his armor, served practical purposes beyond simple decoration, helping deflect direct sunlight from heating the metal beneath, while also clearly displaying his heraldic colors for identification. Successful tournament competitors could win genuinely valuable prizes, including money, fine horses, or valuable equipment, and skilled, famous tournament knights sometimes built considerable personal wealth and reputation purely through repeated competition. Jousting lances were specifically designed to shatter relatively easily upon impact, an intentional safety feature that helped absorb and dissipate the force of a collision, rather than transferring it entirely into the unseated rider. Medieval swords evolved through various distinct styles, including longer blades designed for two-handed use, as armor grew more protective, requiring more concentrated force to find gaps or overcome plate defenses. Shield shapes and sizes changed considerably over the medieval period, shrinking gradually from larger designs offering broad body coverage toward smaller, more specialized shapes as plate armor increasingly handled protection on its own. A knight's spurs carried genuine symbolic weight beyond their practical riding function, and receiving a knighthood was sometimes referred to informally as earning one's spurs, a phrase still used figuratively today. Running a large medieval castle required considerable organized staff, including officials responsible for financial management, household provisions, and overall daily administration, effectively functioning as a small, self-contained governed community. Major medieval feast days and religious holidays were celebrated with particular enthusiasm within castle communities, involving special meals, decorations, and entertainment marking the changing of the seasons and religious calendar together. Some knights embraced a tradition of wandering deliberately from place to place, seeking adventure, challenges, and opportunities to prove their chivalric virtue, a romanticized ideal that appeared frequently in medieval literature. Among medieval literature's most enduring creations, legendary stories describing a noble king, his loyal knights, and a magical round table designed specifically to avoid any appearance of hierarchy among its seated members captured audiences for centuries. Within these same legendary tales, a mysterious and sacred object became the object of an extended, idealized quest, symbolizing the pursuit of spiritual perfection alongside more conventional knightly adventure and glory. Before formally receiving knighthood, a candidate traditionally spent a solitary night in prayer and quiet reflection, a ceremonial vigil meant to prepare him spiritually for the responsibilities he was about to formally accept. Historical records describe numerous significant medieval sieges, some stretching on for many months, testing both the physical endurance of defenders and the patience and resources of the besieging army camped outside. Maintaining a castle's moat required ongoing attention, and defenders needed to ensure it remained sufficiently deep and clear to continue serving its intended defensive purpose throughout the years. Castle towers served multiple overlapping purposes beyond simple defense, including functioning as watchtowers offering early warning of approaching danger, and as signal points capable of relaying urgent messages across considerable distances using fire or smoke. When a valuable noble was captured in battle, negotiating his ransom followed established customs, and the amount demanded typically reflected the captured knight's wealth, rank, and political importance quite precisely. Battlefield medical care during the medieval period remained fairly limited by later standards, though experienced army surgeons developed practical skill treating wounds, setting broken bones, and managing battlefield injuries as effectively as the era's knowledge allowed. Breeding and training a proper warhorse required years of careful, deliberate effort, and skilled horse breeders were highly valued specialists whose reputation directly affected the quality of horses available to knights in their region. As knights aged or suffered serious injury, many gradually transitioned away from active combat, sometimes taking on administrative roles within their lord's household, or dedicating their remaining years to religious devotion instead. Tournament combat, despite using blunted weapons, still carried genuine risk, and historical records confirm numerous serious injuries and occasional deaths occurred even within these formally structured, supposedly safer competitive events. Many medieval castles that survive today have been carefully preserved or restored, now welcoming visitors as heritage sites and museums, allowing modern travelers to walk the same stone halls and battlements their original occupants once did. Medieval castle chapels sometimes featured surprisingly elaborate decoration for such a small private space, reflecting the genuine importance placed on regular worship within the daily rhythm of castle life. A lord's private chambers within a castle offered a rare degree of personal space and comfort compared to the more communal living arrangements common throughout much of the rest of the fortress. Medieval castle windows grew progressively larger and more elaborate over time as the need for pure defensive strength gradually gave way to a greater emphasis on comfort, light, and gracious living within increasingly settled, peaceful regions. Certain medieval castles incorporated dedicated hunting grounds within their surrounding estate, reflecting hunting's dual role as both a practical food source and a favored, prestigious pastime among the medieval nobility. A knight's household expenses could be considerable, covering the maintenance of horses, weapons, armor, and supporting staff. And many knights depended heavily on their lord's patronage or their own inherited land to sustain this same demanding lifestyle. Medieval blacksmiths developed specialized techniques for tempering steel, carefully controlling heating and cooling to achieve blades and armor plates that balanced hardness with enough flexibility to avoid shattering under impact. Castle builders sometimes incorporated deliberately confusing internal layouts, with narrow winding passages designed to slow and disorient any attacker who successfully breached the outer defenses. Medieval knights competing in tournaments often displayed considerable personal flair, with elaborately decorated helmets, crests, and horse trappings intended to make a memorable, impressive visual statement before the assembled crowd. The concept of a knight's personal honor extended well beyond the battlefield, and public reputation, generosity, and fair conduct in everyday dealings mattered considerably to how a knight was regarded by his peers. Castle communities typically included a range of skilled craftspeople beyond blacksmiths, including carpenters, masons, and leather workers, each contributing essential skills to the fortress's daily operation and maintenance. Medieval siege camps, established by besieging armies outside a castle's walls, functioned essentially as temporary small towns, complete with their own supply lines, cooking areas, and basic sanitation arrangements for the encamped soldiers. And certain castles were specifically designed with a secondary hidden escape route, allowing the lord's family and key defenders a final, discreet means of evacuation if the fortress's fall became unavoidable. Medieval knights were expected to demonstrate generosity, particularly toward those less fortunate, and charitable giving formed a genuine, expected part of a knight's broader chivalric reputation and public identity. The practice of formally challenging another knight to single combat, sometimes to settle a dispute or defend one's honor, followed established customs and rules intended to keep such confrontations formally regulated rather than descending into chaotic violence. Medieval tapestries, often elaborately woven with scenes of hunting, battle, or religious imagery, serve both decorative and practical purposes within a castle's great hall, helping insulate cold stone walls while displaying the lord's wealth and taste. A knight's ceremonial dubbing sometimes took place during significant public occasions, including major religious festivals or royal celebrations, adding considerable additional prestige to the personal achievement itself. Castle stables required careful, dedicated management, and skilled grooms held genuinely important positions within the household, responsible for the health and readiness of horses that were, quite literally, essential to a knight's entire way of life. Medieval armor required regular, careful maintenance to prevent rust and ensure continued flexibility at the joints, and a knight squire typically bore considerable responsibility for this same ongoing upkeep. Certain medieval castles were built specifically to control and tax important trade routes or river crossings, generating significant ongoing revenue for their lord, well beyond their purely defensive military value. Medieval knights sometimes commissioned illuminated manuscripts, recording their family history and notable deeds, richly decorated books intended to preserve and celebrate their lineage for future generations to admire. The relationship between a medieval lord and the knights who served him was built on reciprocal obligation, and a capable, generous lord was expected to provide fair reward, protection, and support in exchange for his knights' continued loyalty. Certain medieval castles featured elaborate formal gardens alongside their more practical kitchen gardens, offering a deliberately peaceful, cultivated retreat within an otherwise heavily fortified, practical environment. Medieval knights training for tournament combat practiced extensively against a rotating wooden target called a quintain, designed to punish poor technique by swinging around and striking an improperly executed pass. The armor worn by lower-ranking soldiers differed considerably from a knight's full-plate armor, typically relying on simpler, less expensive protection like padded garments or partial mail, reflecting the significant cost gap between knighthood and ordinary military service. Medieval castle records, when they survive, offer historians valuable, detailed insight into household expenses, staffing, and daily operations, painting a far more practical, grounded picture than romanticized later depictions often suggest. Certain medieval knights became famous specifically for their skill and success within the tournament circuit itself, earning considerable wealth and reputation without necessarily achieving comparable fame in actual warfare. A castle's defensive strength depended not just on its walls, but on the skill, morale, and adequate provisioning of the garrison actually stationed within it, since even the strongest fortification required capable defenders to hold it. Medieval society's fascination with chivalric ideals persisted considerably beyond the practical decline of knighthood itself, with later centuries continuing to romanticize and reimagine this same distinctive medieval institution. The tradition of formally granting land and title in exchange for military service gradually declined as medieval warfare increasingly shifted toward paid professional soldiers rather than knights fulfilling feudal obligation. Certain castles played pivotal roles during significant historical conflicts, their walls bearing witness to events that shaped the broader political history of the region surrounding them. Medieval knights' funeral rites often included considerable ceremony, reflecting their elevated social status, with proper burial and memorial serving as a final formal acknowledgement of a lifetime spent in service to chivalric ideals. Even now, castles standing quietly across the modern landscape continue drawing visitors curious to walk through halls once filled with feasting footsteps and the quiet, patient discipline of a way of life that has long since faded into history. And so, tonight we leave that torch-lit, stone-walled world exactly where its own old stories so often settle. Quiet halls, sleeping banners, and walls that have simply outlasted everyone who ever raised them. Certain medieval castles were built in remarkably remote, or difficult locations specifically to make any potential siege as challenging and costly as possible for an attacking force to even reach, let alone successfully besiege. A knight's shield was traditionally carried on his left arm, freeing his dominant right hand for his weapon, a practical arrangement that also influenced how heraldic designs were traditionally oriented and displayed. Medieval castle builders carefully considered prevailing wind direction when planning kitchens and latrines, a practical bit of forward thinking that helped keep unpleasant odors away from the Great Hall and main living quarters. Certain knights took considerable pride in maintaining and displaying trophies from tournament victories, decorating their halls with tokens, ribbons, or other mementos commemorating their competitive successes. Medieval castle wells were sometimes dug to remarkable depths, occasionally cutting directly through solid rock, representing a genuinely significant engineering undertaking essential to a castle's long-term self-sufficiency. The image of a knight rescuing those in distress became such a persistent cultural ideal that it continued influencing popular storytelling and imagination for centuries after actual medieval knighthood had faded from practical existence. Certain medieval tournaments incorporated foot combat events, as well as mounted jousting, testing a knight's skill with sword and shield, in addition to his horsemanship and lance work. Medieval castle staff followed a fairly rigid social hierarchy of their own, with senior household officials holding considerably more authority and status than ordinary servants and laborers working throughout the fortress. A knight's helmet often included a decorative crest mounted on top, sometimes shaped like an animal or symbolic figure, adding a further layer of personal or family identification visible even at a distance. Medieval siege warfare occasionally involved catapulting unconventional projectiles over castle walls, including, in some historically documented cases, diseased animal carcasses intended to spread illness among the defenders within. Certain castles maintained their own small garrison of permanent soldiers year-round, supplemented by additional knights and levied troops called up specifically during times of active conflict or heightened threat. Medieval knights returning from lengthy campaigns or crusades sometimes brought back new ideas, goods, and cultural influences from distant lands, subtly reshaping fashion, cuisine, and customs back within their home regions. The formal process of knighting a new candidate sometimes included the presentation of ceremonial gifts, including a sword, spurs, and occasionally a horse, each item carrying its own symbolic significance within the ceremony. Medieval castle records occasionally document surprisingly detailed household budgets, tracking everything from the cost of candles and firewood to the wages owed to various skilled craftspeople employed within the fortress. Certain knights who distinguished themselves through exceptional service were sometimes rewarded with additional land grants, gradually increasing their wealth, status, and the number of knights and soldiers they could themselves command. Medieval castle architecture continued evolving even as gunpowder weapons grew more prevalent, with later fortifications incorporating lower, thicker walls and angled bastions specifically designed to better withstand cannon fire. A knight's reputation could be damaged considerably by accusations of cowardice or dishonorable conduct, and formal processes sometimes existed for a knight to publicly answer such serious charges before his peers. Medieval hunting expeditions organized by castle lords sometimes involved considerable numbers of participants and support staff, functioning as both a practical food-gathering exercise and an important social and diplomatic occasion. Certain castles incorporated dedicated armories, secure storage rooms where weapons and armor were carefully maintained and organized, ready for rapid distribution should the fortress face sudden attack. The medieval period's fascination with symbolic numbers and religious imagery frequently appeared in castle architecture and decoration, reflecting the deep integration of faith into nearly every aspect of daily medieval life. Even the quietest, most peaceful medieval castles maintained constant readiness in some form, their walls, gates, and garrisons, a permanent, patient reminder of a world where safety could never be entirely taken for granted, that the same old castle stones that once echoed with feasting and footsteps are right now simply resting quietly beneath a dark sky, holding their silence exactly as they always have. Somewhere, a banner is stirring gently in the night air, and none of it needs anything from you right now except your rest. You've drifted tonight through knights and castles, through chivalry and quiet stone halls, past a world of loyalty, honor, and walls built to outlast the centuries. The whole vast, patient story of medieval knighthood, resting now beneath centuries of soft torchlight. Let it hold you now, the way it's always held everything else. Let your breathing settle into its own slow rhythm. There's nowhere else you need to be, nothing else you need to understand tonight. Just this quiet history and this quiet rest, drifting gently together in the dark. Sleep well, and I'll see you next time for another 100 facts, drifting softly into sleep.